Welcome to the Church of God Network podcast, everybody. I am here today with Mike James. He's in the Church of God International. He's an elder. He's also the host of Prove All Things with Jeff Reed, which is a podcast CGI does. I'm not going to lie, Mike, I'm a little jealous of the name. I think I might have told you this before, but I think it's one of the coolest podcast names out there. Prove All Things, just sort of like a perfect church-related podcast name. And
Yeah, definitely. I like
yeah.
it too. Credit goes to Jeff, though. Okay.
Oh, okay, he came up with the name.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. I still have I think I have a magnet on my fridge of Prove All Things. I think I might have got that from Jeff. But
Yeah.
it's a great podcast, great show. I've been on it a couple times. They have really good guests. How often do you all come out with episodes, by the way?
We're doing it once a week,
Week.
Tuesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time. It's live and we record it. So it goes onto our website after that. So you can always get a hold of it. We've got about 2 years worth of shows now on the website. So we're
Okay.
building it up.
Yeah, recording live, bold move.
Yeah.
We don't have the courage to do that yet. Uh, but kudos to you all. It's a good program. We're having Mike on today because we're actually going to talk about an issue that he's uniquely qualified to speak on, but also one that I tend to hear when I fellowship with brethren, especially people maybe below a certain age, and that is how do we serve in a meaningful way in the church, and how do we leverage the skills that we have? Because I think sometimes we get caught in this mental model of there are only a handful of things we can do to serve in the church, and many of which, like, hey, well, I need to be asked to do that thing. But and sometimes people will go through their lives and their careers and not really think, hey, I can use this skill to serve the church, because they don't see a ready-made fit for it. But today we're going to talk about creative ways to use your skills and your past and what the passions that you have to serve in the church. And Mike has a particularly unique background because he worked in the CIA, which the moment I heard that, I was intrigued. I was on board to listen to his story right off the bat. So, Mike, why don't you give people some background about yourself, not only your time in the CIA, but maybe in general, your calling into the church?
Great. Yeah, both of these things happened about the same time in the sense that I started to get into what we believe in the church when I was about 17, 18 years old. So that came first. And I kind of studied it during my college years and then made the decision to get baptized once I got out of college. I wanted to check out exactly what I was learning while I was in college. I confirmed it in my own mind. And then when I graduated college, I got baptized right out of college. I got a job at the Central Intelligence Agency about a year later. So I moved on to the Washington, D.C. area and started meeting with the Church of God International in about 1986. And I guess my dad was involved in both these things in a way because he was getting the Plain Truth magazine.
Hmm.
And I thought it was a political type of a magazine. I wasn't paying much attention to it. But one day I read an article in there about Lent, and I asked for the Christmas booklet and the Easter booklet. And that was the beginning of me then paying attention to the radio program, the TV show, and starting to get all the literature. So my dad was instrumental in that way because he was just getting a free magazine. He didn't get into it like I did. And then with the CIA job, my dad got worried because now that I was out of college, I wasn't going to work on Saturday since I got baptized.
Mhm.
And he got concerned. So he was always scouring the newspaper and he found an ad for the CIA. This is about the mid 80s. Reagan is president.
Mhm.
He's putting more money into government programs, the military, things like that. So the CIA was trying to recruit people with criminology degrees to be part of this new security force they were creating within the CIA. They formerly had used what were called federal police officers to do their security, but now they were creating their own security force. And that's how I got my foot in the door. That was my first job as security, protecting the buildings, checking the people who were coming in, uh, dealing with protesters at our buildings, and things of that nature.
I love the
So
idea. I love the idea that your dad assumes like, oh, the Sabbath is going to be an issue. How about a nice, quiet government job with the CIA, regular hours, like not where you think that's going to go. Yeah,
right, right. That's true. You would think that, but there's a variety of jobs available at the CIA.
yeah.
And what was good was the fact they were the federal government. They were going to try to accommodate my religious beliefs. So I did write a little document up when I got there about, hey, I know I'm working security. They work weird hours, but I'm willing to work Sundays and nights and all this and that if I can get my Saturday off.
Mhm.
So I was able to do that with the federal government. It worked out for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've talked a bit, and I think viewers and listeners will know that my brother works in intelligence as well for the federal government. So it's odd that we've had two people on with this kind of skill set. It doesn't seem like something that's prevalent in the church, but sure enough. So you start working in the CIA. What kind of work did you do over the years in that career?
Yeah. So a lot of after that initial security job, I got my foot into doing a lot of research type jobs. So my initial job after security was in the counterterrorism center, and I was doing a lot of research on terrorist incidents. We were inputting information into databases on terrorist incidents throughout the world, who was perpetrating it, what country did this happen in, what were they doing? What were they using? So we had a database like that and another database pertaining to terrorism. And then we would gather information out of the databases for the analysts who were writing position papers on terrorism. Those papers would go to Congress, they'd go to the president, they'd go to other agencies. And we were getting that information and then giving it to the analyst and also inputting that information that was happening every day in the world into those databases. And so that was my second job, which led to a third job that was doing similar things, but with all types of information, not just terrorism,
Yeah.
but economic information, political information, you name it, whatever's going on in other parts of the world, we would populate information into a database like that, and then pull that information out and give it to other analysts who were dealing with all those different subjects.
Sure.
So that job led to a job in the Crime and Narcotics Center, a rotational assignment. Again, at the CIA, they like you to do a job for 3 years and then get into something else.
Yeah.
Not everybody does that, but a lot of folks do move around a bit, which is really cool also.
Mhm.
So, crime and narcotics led to a rotation in what was called the National Drug Intelligence Center. We were trying to look at drugs, fight the drug issues strategically with all these different people coming in from different government agencies. It was set up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I got close to Pittsburgh, which is my hometown.
Mhm.
So I was able to go there for a couple of years, work with FBI folks, FBI agents, FBI analysts, marshals, DEA folks, Coast Guard, all these different elements of the federal government that are working on the drug issue, doing different things. We were bringing all that knowledge together in one place to try to address the drug issue strategically. That particular agency is no longer in existence.
Yeah.
The congressman who got it set up eventually passed away, and that agency just went out of business because of that.
This was pre 9/11, right?
Yeah, this is pre 9/11. We're talking mid 90s now.
So this is like
Uh,
a precursor to the fusion centers as we talked about before, right? It's sort of like a similar concept for those who are aware of what fusion centers are.
Exactly, exactly. Again, a fusion center within certain government agencies, you're bringing different elements of the agency together, but that also brings in outside agencies into your fusion center, also
Mhm.
on rotational assignments. This was just like a huge fusion center that was bringing all the agencies that work on drugs into one place.
Yeah. And even, it's fascinating. I don't think you mentioned this to me previously, but the idea that CIA liked having people do rotations and have different skill sets built and be in different environments over the course of their career is pretty interesting. Sort of kudos to them, because I think sometimes what can happen is um, people or companies or divisions can stagnate if they're doing the same thing for too long. So you don't get enough outside input, different perspectives, and sort of on its face, you don't think when coming from a certain division and you make terrorism and you go into drug related issues, you might not right off the bat think, oh, well, here's some things I can take from my previous position, but invariably there are. And I think that's sort of what we'll be talking about in the church, is that if we're passionate about the church and serving in the church, and we sort of see everything we do through that lens, you can find some creative ways to use those skill sets to help in the church. So what, you were at this job for a while and you retired, and then you transitioned into the ministry. Can you talk a bit about how that happened?
Sure. So I was still working at the agency. I became a deacon in the church, still at the agency. I became an elder in the church, and I was still working full time at the agency. And when I was about to retire, I mentioned it to a colleague of mine, Jeff, of course, with the
Mm-hmm.
program. He was working full time for CGI at the time. And we had a minister who was thinking about retirement, and he wasn't sure yet. But when they learned I was going to retire, they gave me an opportunity to work full time with the church, which was like a dream for me, to be dealing with research on church related matters every day instead of drugs and terrorism and things like that.
Yeah.
That was something that just grabbed me. And I was thinking about becoming a contractor with the government, continuing to make pretty good money with a pension. But I said, no, I got to go for this, make less money, but I'm doing what I really love to do. I
Yeah.
got to work from home also, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, and what I brought to the church, I think, was the ability with intelligence to look at a lot of different information and then weigh how good that information is. Because in the
Mm-hmm.
church, it's very similar. A lot of these conspiracy theories that many people in the church are jumping on or looking at or have looked at.
Yep.
Again, you're able to weigh the pluses and minuses of various stories and determine through critical thinking that this just doesn't hold a lot of weight or a lot of water. Because of my experience working with intelligence for all those years, you
Yeah.
knew that one source is probably better than another, but how do you know that that source is better than this source?
Mhm.
Again, that gets into a lot of detail.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into right now,
But it's a
but
good point.
the same thing's true with looking at prophecy or looking at what the government is doing. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
now listen, I know that the government isn't perfect, and we've made a lot of mistakes in government. But one thing I always heard in the church over the years was usually a negative view of the federal government, and I tried to temper that a little bit in some of my messages and when I talk to people individually, that most of the people I met who were working in government were there for the right reasons. They were trying to do good for the government, for other people. What happens is, like anything, political ideas come to the fore for those who are appointed by the Democratic president or the Republican president, whoever it may be, and they begin to influence the agency a bit and take them in certain directions.
Yeah, and just also people not having perfect information. You talk about using that framework and that knowledge set to analyze what you can and can't say about scripture, what you can and can't say for sure about world events. I know in intelligence, a lot of it's about confidence levels and likelihoods and probabilities. It's not, you don't speak in black and white terms, which is great. I think we have to do more of that in the church as well. And a big part of the gospel is that I think when people paint with a broad brush everyone in any sector, whether it's the federal government, whether it's in whatever, Hollywood, a region of the country, you wind up detracting from the heart of the gospel, which is mankind can't govern itself. So when you say, well, it's just because they're bad people, the implication is, well, if we just got the bad people out and got good people in, this would be fixed. When in reality, it's just human beings are, I mean, flawed is an understatement. We do all kinds of things without enough knowledge, with intentions we think are good, but in fact are misguided. And so you just make mistakes, and those mistakes have collateral damage and ramifications, and it just sort of goes on in that along those lines. So way more of it is, I think, accidental or the result of imperfect information than people give folks credit for. But to your point, especially I think for a minister, that ability to evaluate information effectively and be able to articulate what we can and can't say for sure is enormously valuable as a teacher. I also happen to know that you did quite a bit of training, like leadership training towards the end of your career, which again, in your function as a minister is also very important. You want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. That is another thing that really has helped me being a elder in the church, being able to teach within the church. And so once I got back from the rotation to the National Drug Intelligence Center, I went back to the original office I was in before I got to the Crime and Narcotics Center. And the job that I had was gone. It had kind of become automated in a way.
Yeah.
So one of the opportunities I had was we were training people on how to use these various databases. We had some specific training things. I can't get into the details of them
Yeah.
that we taught people within the agency. So I started training in the intelligence side, what was called the Directorate of Intelligence at that time, where the analysts are. And then I did that for a while to get my initial training experience. And then I moved on to the operations side and began to train people over there. So this led to other training type jobs, training the trainer, training people how to teach other people on the operations side, the people who were teaching our new recruits, who are our main operators out in the world. We would teach the folks who were teaching them how to teach people. And then that led to another rotation down the road where I was teaching leadership over at the National Reconnaissance Office. And that's an agency that brings together a lot of folks from the military with various elements of the intelligence agencies. And they are putting the spy satellites up and gathering information through those means. So that leadership training, learning leadership theory, getting to read a lot of books about leadership, being able to teach Covey classes to people, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is all about leadership, greatly enhanced my ability to do sermons, to think about how I'm reaching people as an elder in the church. And I was always looking for ways with various jobs at the agency. Once I became an elder, I realized when I retire, I'm going to continue doing this. I was looking for opportunities to take training jobs.
Yeah.
Because that helped me with my messaging, with sermons, with just dealing with people and learning how to get information across so it could be retained.
Yeah. And that's also an important thing too. Like if you're continually looking for opportunities for that crossover benefit or ways to help yourself. I remember when we were talking, you said you took some not public speaking classes, but what's the really famous one? Why am I blanking on the name?
Toastmasters Club. They had a Toastmasters Club within the agency. So once a week at around lunchtime, we could go and meet for an hour, and we could give speeches and
Yeah.
things of that nature. And they had I know the Worldwide Church had a program
Hmm.
called what's
Spokesman's
the name?
Club.
Spokesman's Club,
Yeah.
and it was mirrored off of the Toastmasters club
Yeah.
idea. And that was a thing I used, that I was getting at working for the agency to use for my job as an elder. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I know a lot of people listening or watching this are seeing a lot of themes in terms of how it helped you become a minister, right? And I think maybe for some folks, they're going, "Well, I am not a minister, or I likely won't become one, as much as you can predict, right?" So maybe that doesn't apply to me as much. But what I would say is, on the first hand, there is uh, an impending leadership issue in the church in terms of there is a demographic that was a bit more affected by the big splits a while back, and so you have a certain generation with less representation in the church. I would imagine the Gen X is probably one of them, and you do have a lot of ministers now are coming up that did take untraditional paths. Like, for example, my dad's a minister, never a pastor, like, but he was a New York City public school teacher for 30 years. And so very easy to see how that overlaps as well, being in front of people every day, teaching. And the thing about leadership training or teaching is that we're all called to be leaders. We're all called in some way. Now, we might not be in a formal position right now, but we're called to be leaders in the kingdom. And that skill needs to be getting built now. But even some people might remember we had a man named Jonathan Reedy on our podcast talking about leadership training. He's not a minister, not a deacon or anything, but he does, you never know what opportunities you'll have to maybe speak and fill in a gap. If there's folks in an area who maybe it's a small congregation, they could use someone who could give a sermonette or a talk on something. He's been used by different groups to give leadership training in parts of the developing world. And that's because that's what he does for a living. And I think if we are looking at ways to parlay what we do for a career into some way to help the church, you will eventually find something, even if it takes a bit, right? Like I was baptized at 18. It took me a good bunch of years to figure out what I wanted to do for work, even, and I got into the nonprofit world. And then, I'm about a decade in now, but I found a way to have that crossover, right? And so there's a million different needs in the church to address, especially now when we're not 150,000 people with tons of money and resources the way we might have been in the past. There are so many creative ways we can leverage the skill sets and the passions we have to serve.
No doubt about it. The network you guys have created here is a unique idea within the disparate churches that are out there, of bringing them together in some way. And I think your nonprofit experience would definitely have helped you in coming up with those ideas. What I've recently done, we had a widow talking to me recently about wanting to connect with other widows, so we set up an online meeting for them,
Mhm.
and they've just taken off with it. We started a woman's online meeting group, and they love this because they're able to connect with people all over the country, and then they can talk about issues within their individual churches where they are helping each other because of the ideas that they're giving back and forth to
Yeah.
each other. I had one fella who's a younger fella in his about 30s, and he was talking about wanting to do something for the church. What he didn't realize was he was already doing something for the church, because he's a businessman and he's got a number of different businesses. He got into the hatchet throwing uh,
Okay.
thing. He got
Yeah.
into the escape room thing. So he has all
Mhm.
those unique ideas about those types of businesses, but he's made a lot of money through that. And I said, listen, the fact that you're working out there and you're tithing and helping the church do what it's doing, that's a huge thing that you haven't even seen. That the fact that you are a good businessman and have been able to become successful, that in itself is helping the church, and you aren't even realizing it.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I can imagine again, because I think part of this discussion is sometimes it's hard to think creatively about how to help if you don't have like an idea that comes to you right away. So for someone like him, right, you have tons of business experience, you know how to start things up, the process that's involved, the legal process, the dealing with customers, how to bring people in, marketing. So you can be an asset to someone who maybe does want, if someone does want to start a nonprofit or start some sort of initiative that maybe is better served doing through a company or there are a million different skill sets probably in every person's job they do that they don't realize they can use in the church in some capacity. I also think in many ways it's up to leadership in the church and maybe people who want to do creative things to reach out to people with different skill sets who maybe can't like own starting a nonprofit or be helping run the church, but their skill set can be used to help the effort. Like I know we try to do that at CGN. We have our research director Mark Philip Pebworth is a PhD. He has so much experience with like data visualizations. My brother does too. We have quite a crew of folks who have a lot of experience with those kind of things, and we're trying to take our unique data set with the congregation map and the various information we have about the church and see if that crew of people can analyze the data and tell us more about the Church of God and how it's functioning, maybe help forecast some potential issues to look out for, things to get ahead of in the future. There's just so many cool things we can do with the work that we do to make a living to serve the church. But I think it does take some creative brainstorming, maybe some patience. I mean, it took me like 4, 5, 6 years through grad school even to find that I even wanted to be in nonprofits. And it wasn't until a couple years after that that the idea for Church of God Network was born. So it could take some time, but you can do a lot of really cool things with the skill sets that people have in the church.
Yeah, you're hitting on something there that it took you a few years before you had enough experience to then know
Mhm.
maybe what direction you should move in. And that's what I say to young folks out there that you're going to get it. It's going to come to you. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, just get varied experiences,
Yeah.
learn different things, and all of a sudden something is going to click and it's going to take root and you're going to become good at it and want to do it. And what you're telling me is maybe as an elder, if we know people within our congregations, have them do something after services to help that community there,
Mhm.
that they can learn something from anybody, whether it is a widow or a single woman or an older man who's got varied experiences. They can bring that to the rest of the people within that group, and everybody can grow from it.
Yeah, I mean, so another example, Corbin Rose, who's also on our board, but he's just they're all good friends of mine. But Corbin is someone who I've known for a while, and was sort of like was one of the people who everyone knew was a very much pro cross group fellowship and unity guy. He has such a great skill set in terms of technology and building websites and applications and stuff like that. He has done so much for the Church of God that I don't think people realize. Like it feels like half of everything that's ever been created in the Church of God online is something Corbin's had his hands in. But it does, to your point, it does take time too, because when you're 21 or 22, you might have a lot of energy and want to find something to do, and it might be tough to sort of be like, let me put my head down and work at something for a bit and find out what I'm passionate about, where I could find an avenue to serve in the church. But there are, like we were saying, we are spread out, and because many of the groups are small, there are a lot of creative ways we can do things to help. And sometimes it's like volunteering that you go to your local ministry and say, hey, by the way, I have a skill set in case you or anyone needs it. Sometimes it might not even be that. I know some folks who have been talking about, oh, I'd love to start a podcast specifically aimed at people in the church to help people deal with grief, right? That's a big one. Some people have gone through some horrible things. And there are some folks I know who are licensed therapists, people who have degrees in psychology or have very specific experiences on that front, and essentially starting up a new sub community within the church of people who've gone through these things and have a supportive outlet. There's tons of things you can do. And sometimes it's, well, I have the skill set maybe to be in front of the camera and talk about this. I'm willing to be open and vulnerable, but maybe I don't know how to do it tech wise. There are tons of people in the church who have that skill set. Or how do I market this? How do I get this out specifically to church people? I don't know where to start. There are people who have tons of experience marketing or branding things. So like there are tons of creative ways to help out.
Yeah, you're hitting on something there. I was in Atlanta this past weekend speaking at the church, our church there, and a young lady pulled me aside and she wanted to start a group, some type of online group of people who've been through some traumatic events in their life. And I'm trying to get that going for her where we can bring people together who have had similar experiences, maybe have a counselor involved with that, just so they got that support there
Yeah.
within the church. We've done it with the widows, and we've got not only CGI widows, we've got widows from other church organizations involved with that. So
Yeah.
again, what you've created here, I think, is kind of a clearinghouse where maybe some of those things could be advertised, and people can come to that website and know that, hey, I got this resource here, I got that one there. So yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe we can talk more about that later.
Yeah,
I can
sure.
with the people you're talking about, with the people I just met. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean that is part of the concept of Church of God Network is helping information flow faster, more freely, more clearly and precisely in the Church of God across groups because there is so much again talent, there's so much need and so much desire to help. And if we can remove some of those barriers or more quickly connect people that we know have a passion for something with people with related skill sets, I think we can utilize more of our collective talent.
Yeah, right on. Because I think I'm not going to get into specifics, but there's a fear within some of the corporate churches about doing something that's on the edge a little bit. And with an organization like yours, those types of things may be able to fly a little bit better over here, where it's not under any specific church title, but anybody from the church can get involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, I mean, a thing I would suggest to everyone as well is that, I think there are certain things that are probably almost entirely innocuous, right? If you want to go and if you want to start a charitable nonprofit to help the homeless in your community, or maybe you have someone, I know some folks who had a child with a very specific diagnosis, health related wise, and they are involved in charitable organizations that help folks in that similar situation. Those kind of things are almost universally innocuous, but there are some things where maybe if you do want to, just using the podcast example, because we're on a podcast, start something like that on a particular topic. There is like there are circumstances where perhaps the local leadership might be nervous about that, depending on what the topic is. And I would say, I think in my experience, the vast majority of ministers, if they don't feel blindsided, if they don't feel like they're excluded from the process, if you like tell them, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing, this is how I want to help. I want to give you a heads up. Do you know anyone who might want to help out with this, and work through any sort of potential fears or concerns they might have? That's a good way to build goodwill and partnerships with leaders, because I think once you remove that element of coming across inadvertently subversive, I think it's easier to get folks on board.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And if I could tell people one thing that I found to be the most important lesson of my 33 plus years in government, it was communication.
Yeah.
Communication. Communication was the number one thing. If people had only let so and so know this, let so and so know that, over communication was always better than less communication, because if everybody's on the same page, if everybody's not surprised by certain things, take the Lloyd Austin situation right now that's in the news, where the Secretary of Defense was in the hospital. Not everyone in upper echelons of government knew where he was and what was happening with him. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
If he had just told someone to tell everybody, I know people are funny about their medical situations and things of that nature, but that's just one example of how things can get out of whack. People can start to think the worst rather than the best,
Right.
because communication was not handled in the way it should have been handled.
Right.
And yeah, you're right on with that. And I think a network like you guys have, when I want to try something new, I go to the folks who are at headquarters and I
Mhm.
let them know, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
I don't just start it, you
Right.
know?
Well, because there's several things, right? There are plenty of scriptures about a soft word and being gentle towards other people, right? To not start off on an adversarial foundation, but also there is something to be said about counsel, and counsel of literally any type, right? Like it doesn't effective advice and counsel and insight can come from anywhere. Even if there's someone who like you really are not a fan of, or maybe you don't have a good relationship with them, they are still capable of providing sound insight and counsel. And when you do anything of substance in any walk of life, it's good to get as much input and counsel as you can. I know for Church Again Network, we spent so the idea first was floated in like the feast of 2017, and we didn't launch until August of 2019. We spent a good couple years just like talking to people, talking to leadership, talking to members in different groups. Like, what do you think? And I mean, and not only before we launched, but like since, we've gotten amazing input from people, because you have to realize you don't have enough. And I'm sure this actually probably relates to your time at the CIA as well, that no one person has enough information to effectively do anything well. Like you
Right.
need other people's input, you need other perspectives and skills, and you need a team. And there are certain things where certain things would never just even get off the ground and be anywhere close to effective if we hadn't had a particular person make even a small comment about what it was we were doing. And that's another. I mean, this is a whole nother topic, but that's why incentivizing honest feedback, open feedback, and putting all the info on the table is an important thing for the church as well. But that's a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah, it definitely is. You're hitting on. I did a sermon many years ago called Team Together, Everyone Achieves More. And when I worked at the agency, you were compartmentalized into this office. If you didn't have a need to know, that information stayed only in this office.
That's
But
fair.
over the years in the agency, they started to realize that, wait, you know what? If we had brought in the operation guys and the analytical guys together, the fusion center idea to work on this, the operations guys knew some things that the analytical guys didn't know, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
then when you brought in the science and technology guys, they had another angle on things. And that is so essential to doing a better job, is bringing in more
Yeah.
ideas, more minds, getting rid of groupthink. We
Yep.
made a number of intelligence errors over the years because we thought we knew, and the higher ups saw it a certain way, and that influence went down into the analytical areas, the operational areas, and everybody wanted to get that promotion or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So they went along to get along, and we made major mistakes because of groupthink.
Yeah.
And what they realized, that they got better at this, to bring in other people, do rotation in another office to get a new set of eyes on the problem. Here's something totally off the wall, because who knows?
Yeah.
That might be the answer.
Usually, I mean, and you very often need that. And that's the thing, any group of people in any context that does the same thing for a long period of time, you're going to sink into not only groupthink, but like, this is the way we've always done it. It's just easier because it is. It just gets easier the more you've done something. And perhaps the answer is the best thing for this group of folks or this initiative is to change in this big way. And it's going to take effort. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's for the better in the long term. And so that's also, that speaks to the need in the church, especially to have people from different professional, not only professional, but like just personal backgrounds. If you're someone, I know folks who were adopted or had really rough childhoods and have a unique experience just in terms of life. Those things can also be used to help people in the church because you need different perspectives. Each one of us only has our own perspective and whatever inputs we've received over the years. And you need more of those if you want to make more effective decisions and have more effective initiatives. So yeah, I think the eliminating groupthink thing is aided by the more effectively we can use people's varying skill sets from varying walks of life. Because I mean, I can't tell you how many times we're debating something behind the scenes in Church You Got Network, or like we have a whatever, something about the website or the podcast or a program we're going to do. And I'm just like, okay, everyone, I want everyone to tell me why they think this is bad. Like, what are we doing that's bad? Because we're going to find out eventually, and we don't want to be blindsided by it. Like, let's be our own harshest critics and try to get ahead of things now. And all times I can't see it. People will tell you I don't have like necessarily an artistic eye for a lot of this stuff. So I depend on people who do. And I'm sure everyone has those things where, hey, I do this well, I don't do this particularly well. I need someone else to help me on that front.
Yeah, right on. When I was in training, the last job I had was training the new people coming in. We'd have about a 1 month orientation program. And one of the things in that training was there was an exercise we do towards the end of the 4 weeks where you get together on some intelligence problems. So you create teams within the class and you give them this intelligence problem and you break them into teams. And then you see by working in different groups on this problem, all these various issues that can arise and what you learn from the team experience, and then you go over what you learned and what happened. That was something I found very valuable that I think would be great for the church to look at our history in the Church of God over the last, 60, 70 years and look at what was the demise of the worldwide Church of God. Why did it fall apart? Why have our churches continued to split up? There are some movements now for unity, which is great, but why did this happen? And what have we learned? And how can we use that going forward? Again, that is something I think that your organization is helping us with. And I say this to any church leaders out there. You can't do it by yourself. You don't know best. You need to get wisdom and many counselors. Look at the mistakes in order to get better in the future. Now, God's definitely gonna help us, but what I think people miss is God wants to see us working,
Meaningful work.
at doing this with Him.
Yeah, meaningful work. That's the which again I credit Jonathan Reedy for that as well. Like that phrase has stuck with me. He gave a sermon years ago, and that's the thing that's always stuck with me because the moment you are involved in meaningful work, related specifically to God, your conversion, the church, anything like that. It's one of those things like, I don't know how I functioned before I was engaged in this meaningful work. You know what I mean? You're changed permanently. And to your point about worldwide, what is also interesting to keep in mind is that for a while when it was growing a lot, there were a ton of there were a ton of ways within the formalized structure that people could leverage their skill sets and come into the church and help out and provide that expertise. You had a lot of people who, it wasn't just like career church employees. You had people coming from like the best of these industries and coming and helping out. But even with that, like that has to be a constant process because the moment that isn't emphasized, you can get, it's very easy to slip into groupthink. The natural tendency of any
Mhm.
initiative is to slip into groupthink and patting yourself on the back. It doesn't matter if it's a church or a small nonprofit or a for-profit business. You always have to fight that the inertia towards like complacency and telling each other we're doing a good job sort of thing. So that's a really good point. Just being constantly self-critical and asking for outside input, because I mean, scripture's full of examples articulating that every person in the church has a function. Every part of the body is vital, and you can't say one part to the other, "I don't need you." It's not just a platitude. It really is. You live any length of time, you have unique things to offer. You have valuable things to offer your neighbor, your brethren, and a role that's expected of you in the church. And it doesn't matter necessarily what it is, but it matters if you're doing it with the right intention and the right heart, and again, doing things in a responsible way. But if you're doing those things, whatever you're contributing, whatever you have a passion for, is going to have an effect.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I think when you do become successful, that's when you need to watch out,
Mm-hmm.
because that success breeds sometimes incompetence. Sometimes you think you're at the top of the heap, and you don't need to do any work anymore. Many successful businesses have seen their demise because they thought that new idea would never work.
Yeah.
And it ended up taking over the market, and people were not anticipating that things change is constant. There's
Yeah.
always going to be something else you need to be aware of and watching out for. I think AI is the big thing right now,
Mm-hmm.
but we had a little bit of an issue moving from mainline TV to the internet, with
Mm-hmm.
our program and everything. There was debate about should we do it or not, and then we finally made the choice. We got to do this, but everybody gets behind the eight ball a little bit, and if you're playing devil's advocate, if you're trying to test yourself on a regular basis, you're going to do better than those who rest on their laurels and think they got it all figured out.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome points, Mike. Do you have any concluding thoughts? I know this is like it's a big topic, but I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, because I do see such energy in the church around wanting to serve or do something meaningful. I think some folks maybe feel, I don't want to say unfulfilled. That might be a little too strong a term, but they want to do more. And I think some folks just don't really know where to start. So, do you have any advice for folks who want to get involved in something or want to maybe start something and maybe don't know how to take the first couple steps?
Yeah, I would say begin a dialogue with the leadership within your individual group, whoever that may be. And if you're finding that to be a roadblock, then use some of the resources like your organization. There are ways people can do things outside of your individual church that is still church related. Shoot me an email, okay? I'm creating little cell groups in different parts of the country where there isn't an established church. And I don't care if you're part of another organization, and you want to get together with just a couple people in somebody's home. We need to have these way stations out there where people can go and meet with like-minded people. The online stuff is fantastic. I got nothing against it, but I do feel that the face-to-face relationship, building that, is so important to helping people in their lives become stronger as Christians, and give those ideas to other people, and see what they can do with them. Keep reaching out. Don't ever give up hope that your ideas are not being listened to. Sometimes it takes helping that leader out with things when they're not listening to you, for them to later think, oh, well, let me give this a try now
Hmm.
because what I've been doing hasn't been working. If you run away with all your toys and go somewhere else,
Yeah.
you're splitting up that power you have as a team.
Yeah.
Let's be a little more patient with each other. Let's try to work with each other wherever we're at that time, because growth doesn't happen like this. It happens slowly and surely, but you got to hang in there when things aren't going your way.
Right. And that's a fantastic point. I'm glad you said that because that is you limit the power of the team. If the moment an idea is rejected, you take your toys and go off. You take your ball and go home because it also hamstrings your future capacity to engage in whatever project you want to do effectively. Because if you can't deal with those human relationships, if you can't deal with disagreeing uh, at the very first point when it comes up, you're probably not going to have much success doing whatever it is you're going to do, dealing with personalities and differences of opinion and going, you know what? These people, number one, we're all in God's church. So we all very explicitly have value to each other and we have an obligation to one another. But then, secondarily, even if maybe someone does have a more abrasive personality, or maybe they don't articulate things always the best way, it's up to us as a team to find a way to highlight what they do well, to find ways to mitigate what other folks don't, to be patient with one another. So that's a fantastic point. I think patience in every walk of life is important, but especially on these sorts of fronts when you want to do something of meaning, it takes time, it takes patience with people. Absolutely. Cool.
Definitely. Only when you go, it's much easier to tell people the real truth when you've established a relationship with them. It's hard to do that when you first meet somebody. You got to have a relationship to really tell people the hard truths, and they can tell you the hard truths. Comes only through time.
Yeah.
Uh, Trust is built through time. You can't just create it like that. And once you lose it, it's hard to build it back up again.
Yeah, yeah, I mean that's sort of I think the nature of the Church of God right now is that the either the trust that hasn't been built because we just have been separated and haven't gotten to know one another, or the trust that has been broken, very hard to put back together. But it's not impossible. We have admonitions to go to our brother to if we're bringing a gift before the altar and we know there's an issue between us and a brother or sister in the church, fix that first. So the good thing is we have pretty explicit guidance in scripture. And I will say from my own experience, I'm sure you can echo this, Mike, that whatever work is required to get involved in the meaningful pursuit that you want to, it you get it back and then some, and like orders of magnitude more when you're doing the work. So I encourage everyone to try to find some way to give back to the Church of God, to your local communities, something that helps you, that gives you purpose when you wake up every day. We all have that in our conversions. Like we have a responsibility before God to take in Christ's nature and to change into the likeness of Christ. But in terms of outward focus on other people, very there's very little like meaningful work with other human beings.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And don't forget, just your example, whenever you're with someone, just walking down the street, saying hello to your neighbor, or welcoming the guy across. I have a new neighbor across the street. I went over and just started talking to him one day. That is Christianity at its core, folks. Just a
Yeah.
simple thing like that. Don't forget the simplicity of Christianity.
Yeah. A lot of times that kind of stuff is harder. Sometimes you don't want
Yeah,
to be
it is.
the
It
nice outgoing
is.
guy. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Well, thanks,
But
Mike. It's been great.
you can do it in different. If you're not the extrovert, you can write a letter to a prisoner. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great segue, man. You're a good straight man. I mean, that's the last episode we did was with Gary Johnson dealing with folks in prison. I don't know if you saw it, but that was the
No,
very
I didn't
last
see it. I didn't see
podcast
it.
we did. So yeah, there's a lot of times we do use those kinds of things. Like I'm not an extrovert or I don't like public speaking. That's like one out of 1,000 things you could do. Like you said, writing letters, cards for folks. A lot of people can't travel. A lot of people, to your point, we're actually working on something. I'd love to touch base with you on it, but like you said, these way stations was a cool way to put it. Maybe that's even what we might call it. But there are entire parts of the country or certain states where, like we were looking at Kansas, Topeka, and Wichita have a cluster of folks, and not necessarily Topeka, more like Kansas City, but they're relatively close. And like the rest of the state has nearly nothing. But there are individual brethren there. And so how do
Right.
you dig in and find those individuals and find fellowship? Because pretty sure everyone, especially in leadership in the Church of God, would agree you got to get together in person if you can. Like online
Right.
stuff is great, but there's nothing like in-person fellowship.
Yeah, we just had a new couple show up at my little group here in Pasadena, and they came out of nowhere. This guy just found us on the web by studying the different. He's aware of the different church groups, but we were closer to him,
Yeah.
and he just came out of nowhere. If we weren't there, where would he go? That's
Yeah.
why I think it's so important that no matter if you got two or three or four people there, get something going at least monthly where you come together to see each other.
Yeah.
So there's a place for that other person who out of nowhere decides he wants to go somewhere.
Yeah. Dig in, have a purpose, serve each other, serve other people. Absolutely. Thanks,
Hey,
Mike.
hey, thanks for this opportunity, man. You got my brain racing now with a lot of things.
That's good. That's part of the process. Pushing stuff back and forth. We might have had a call to determine what we wanted to talk about in this episode, but you don't. Once you get into it, you learn from one another. Doesn't matter what context, how little interaction. That's why it's such a blessing to be called into a body of people. This is not a solo journey. We work out our own salvation before God, but we're called to a group of people. So it's
Right.
been great talking with you, Mike. Loved having you on. Looking forward to being on Prove All Things, but pretty soon, if I remember.
Yes.
So looking forward to seeing you and Jeff, and hope everyone got a lot out of the episode. Thanks again, Mike. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.